So making sure the children are taken care of, I think that kind of gets taken care of through like child support and so on and so forth. Not that I agree that a person should.
Not in the state of Georgia. Just because you pay child support does not mean that your children will legally inherit from you. That's an issue with unwed fathers here. You have
really? Talk to me about that, because I need to know about that, because maybe that's the gap that I'm not understanding.
Yeah, you have to go through a completely different process here in the state of Georgia when you have a child that's not born of a marriage, right? So it's called legitimation, and I do them all the time. And for my dads that are out here who are not marrying women, you don't have any legal right to that child before you go for it.
Of course. So my question is, if I have kids in Georgia, right? And this is just I'm just trying to polish up my ignorance here. If I have kids in Georgia, right, and I have a certain amount of wealth, right, and if I'm not married to the woman that has my kids, right, but she has my kids, like paternity shows my kids, my name's on the birth certificate and so on and so forth, who gets rights to my wealth if I die?
Not your children, because they're not legally your children.
Even though I signed the birth certificate?
No, that doesn't mean anything.
So let me ask you this question. In
the state of Georgia, that doesn't mean anything.
I feel you. Let's focus on the state of Georgia. We can talk about everywhere else later, but because I'm fascinated, because every time I speak to you and somebody else, I learn something new and my brain just goes, poof, right? So if you are not married to said woman and you have children with her and your name is on birth certificates, paternity test has already shown that you're the father, those kids don't get your wealth, right? But if that means you don't have any legal obligation to the kids, right? Or legal,
You don't have any legal obligation to a child until you either petition the court for it or until the mom puts you on child support.
So that's the part I want to.
But the financial obligation is not the same as inheriting, right? So you can have to pay me child support every month, but that still does not mean my child can inherit from you. That just means you have to financially.
Crazy to me. That doesn't even make sense to me. If the court can legally allow someone to draw money from you every month because you signed the birth certificate or there's paternity that shows that you're the father, so on and so forth, they can legally have access to your money for that, which rightfully so. You got to take care of the kids. I'm not arguing that. I'm not saying like men should definitely, if you're not going to be in the kid's life and you have any means to take care of your kids, you should be responsible financially for those kids. In the same right, I feel as though if you die under those same conditions, those kids should still have access to your money if you die. Because then that's not the law taking care of the kids anymore, right? Because if I died...
Well, no, it's not the law taking care of the kids. It's you not taking care of your kids, right? Because the way that the courts look at it is you didn't marry the mom, which you should have, and you didn't. And you also didn't follow legitimation, which you should have, and you didn't. So the children are your responsibility.
Sure. If they're my responsibility, right?
If you are going to have children, the courts would like for them to be born of a marriage so that you are automatically legally responsible for the children, right? But if you didn't do that, you have to do the work to then go to the court and say, these are my kids. I would like some sort of legal right to them. I want them to be able to inherit from me. I would like to have some sort of custody of them. I would like to have a whole host of other things that the legitimation process can give them. If you don't petition the court, though.
Yeah, but see, again, I don't mean to like revisit this because I feel like we're going in circles, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. If you're not married and you're not, and the kids are, on paper yours or paternity wise, they're yours. The court has systems in place to make sure a woman can collect child support and money to take care of the kids, right?
Yes.
Under those same conditions, if the guy dies, the court does not have systems in place to automatically reward the woman and the children. So that, to me, there's a gap there.
There's a whole process, right? So you're going to have to go through a whole thing and trying to petition the court to show that he was the dad, but he wasn't the legal dad. It's a
so
whole
the kids get
thing.
no. The kids get no money if I die.
No,
That's
essentially no.
crazy.
Mom would have to go. Mom would have to go to the estate and try and fight for it, right? And then if the estate pushes back, it's a whole thing. That's why the courts say either you marry her, sir, or you get the legitimation done. One of the two. It's your responsibility to do it.
So this is Georgia, right? What percentage of the United States is like this?
There is a form of the legitimation process in each state. It's not always as formal as Georgia. In some states, you can just sign the birth certificate and the what else is it? An acknowledgement of paternity. So in some states, you can do that, right? But there are states that are like Georgia and have a legitimation process. I don't know the exact number on it.
That's kind of wild. That just further reinforces, like, I feel like the laws need some massaging because it just doesn't really have a clear path to having mutual benefit on all fronts. And I feel like a lot of people don't know these things, and there's a lot of assumptions being made, but I don't know. My brain.
Dads that call me all the time and say, I thought that I could get my kids and and I'm like, no, I signed the birth certificate. Doesn't matter.
What do you mean get your kids?
They just want to see them.
No, I'm not even talking about that. I'm only talking about the money, right? I'm talking about when I'm alive, the kids have access to my money, my income automatically, right?
But wait, because the money part is not the only important part in this conversation.
Right now, I'm only talking about the money part because it's just an aspect that men focus on, right? It's just an aspect because oftentimes when a man gets divorced, he goes from living in a beautiful house with his wife and his kids to now she's living in a beautiful house with the kids and he's living in an apartment in somebody's couch. That's just, those things happen, right? those things happen, right? I'm just saying. Those things happen. So that's what goes through a man's head if he's having the commitment issues, because those are the things he's concerned about versus.
But that's the problem though, Jeff. And that's why I say you keep focusing on the money, but the marriage aspect doesn't just include the monetary portion, right? So when a man is deciding to get married, if you're not ready to be able to take care of your children, right, as a whole, and not just monetarily, but like take care of your family, be involved in it. And you don't need to get married. But that's another reason why you shouldn't also in Georgia be having children outside of wedlock, because if you are, you don't have any legal right to them. So you might have to pay child support for them because that's the only thing that the court can make you do. But until the court grants you the legal right to them, you can't even see them if the mom doesn't want you to.
No, I mean that goes without saying, right? That goes without saying until you get married. In terms of like this conversation, right? So yes, if you get married, you can see your kids, but the moment you get married, if you get divorced, you don't see your kids. Either way, that doesn't happen in a marriage. That doesn't happen in a divorce. I'm talking about the legitimation. So what about when you get divorced? Do you still have to fight to see your kids since you're not married?
The judge is going to order that, right? It'll either be a joint custody schedule between the two, depending on how involved dad is in the children's lives, right? So if mom is the primary parent in the marriage, mom is going to be the primary parent when the divorce comes around, right? So that's why it's important for dads to be just as involved in rearing their children as moms are, because the dads end up saying, oh, well, I don't have any benefit from marriage. She took all my money. She took my kids. And, well, sir, what were you doing with the kids beforehand? Were you going to the PTA meetings? No. Were you helping them with homework? No. How often were you spending time with them? Oh, well, I was working from 10 to 11 at night. Well, I mean,
but let me ask you a question though. And this is the part that is just conflicting to me, right? Because if we're conditioned and the expectations for the man to take care of the family, especially financially, if that's like still the ongoing expectation, even till in this progressive time, like a lot of women seek men who are able to have the means to take care of themselves and a family. But in order to do that, it requires them to work more, work hours, travel to get the bag, however you want to call it, because I do that, right? So the thing is that creates this loop. It's like you are this person that has this responsibility, but yet the court doesn't recognize that as what you did to sacrifice in order to provide a lifestyle for your family. But when it's time to see your kids, they use it against you because you're saying he wasn't at the PTA meetings, he wasn't at the, basketball practices and so on and so forth. But if it's
because at that point, it's not about you, it's about the stability of the children, right? When a court is deciding custody, we don't do it based on, I know it's a lot of nuances. When the court is deciding custody, we don't do it based on the parents' wants and needs. It's a best interest of the child standard, right? So if I've got two kids who mom is the primary parent, dad is always on the road, doesn't spend that much time with them, I'm not going to give dad primary physical custody of those children because essentially dad doesn't know them. I get it, dad. You were out here grinding and hustling. But if I'm doing what's in the best interest of the kids, I would be uprooting what their normal life is like. And the judge's job in a custody battle is to establish as much normalcy and stability for those children during a divorce. It's not about you and mama's feelings, right? It's about the children. So if the kids are used to mom being the primary parent and dad.
Yeah, but what's healthy for the kids though? Just the mom being the primary person or having like both influence? Because there's been a lot of trauma in child rearing where there's single parenthood, where they're not getting the balance of both parents. So whether or not, they look at the father as the person that wasn't spending the kind of time with the child, obviously because he's working and doing whatever, and obviously he would come home and hopefully he'd spend some time with the child, but to make it even more difficult for him to spend time with the kid, does that really benefit the kid if the kid's not seeing their father, right? The
judge isn't excluding a dad from seeing the father. The judge is just saying that you're not going to be the primary parent if you were not primary parent or at least an equal parent in the marriage, because the kids are not used to that. I don't know any judges that have said you cannot see these children ever, sir.
No,
Goodbye.
It's not about that. It's just, I have, okay, here's the deal. I have friends, right? I have friends who, I'm not going to name any names, but if they listen to this, they'll know who they are, right? I have friends who either got separated or they're no longer with the person that they had kids with, right? And they had to do the whole custody thing, right? And the guy was the breadwinner in the relationship, right? The guy was the breadwinner in the relationship, and obviously he had to pay child support, right? But they get split custody. Okay?
They get week on, week off, like joint custody?
Yeah, joint custody, right? But like they're getting joint custody, but he's still paying child support. So whatever he spends on his kid while they're together at his place, taking the kid to do this, taking the kid to do that, so on and so forth, he's still spending money on top of child support, right? So none of that gets credited as anything. Versus if the mom has it, and because she's not the breadwinner, everything that she does with the kid all comes from the dad, right? So my thing is like, if you're
the mom not, what do you mean everything she does with the kid?
She doesn't earn that much money. She doesn't earn that much money, right? So because she's
living off of child support.
Excuse me?
So she's essentially living off of the child support amount?
I'm not saying she's living off of the child support, but because he makes more money, the money from child support comes from him.
Okay.
Right? So my thing is, when whatever she is doing with the child, when she has the kid, the money being used to take care of the child is mostly coming from child support.
How do you know that? How does he know that?
What do you mean? How does it? Because
does she not work? I'm confused.
She just doesn't make that much money. She makes some money, but the majority of the money that is provided to take care of the kid comes from the father. That's just
okay. So I think this is why I get confused, right? Because so child support is a calculation. It's literally a worksheet, and I put in what your income is, I put in what her income is, and then it comes up with pro rata shares of a number, right? So based on your income and her income, there's a total number that it would cost to raise this child or children or whatever.
Right.
And this is your household income.
Okay.
Right. So when you're in a marriage, this is what your household income looks like. This is how much money it costs to take care of these children every single month. Y'all don't realize it, but that's what it is.
Yes.
When you split up, now I have to determine the shares, right? Because mom's portion is still the same here. And if mom is the primary custodial parent, she's going to take the brunt of this because she's raising the child primarily throughout the child's lifetime, right? So then dad's portion of this, the numbers are going to teeter and totter, right? Because dad is the non-custodial parent. So that's where the child support number comes from, right? Usually the child support number is not that large on dad's side that it's going to be able to take care of the child in its entirety on mom's side, because essentially feeding the child, clothing the child, lights, water, bills, and everything else, that's the household expense that the court is taking into account. But we're removing dad from that situation, right? And dad is now just paying a portion of what that household expense is. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, but if the mom doesn't make that much money, that's a pretty big portion, right?
It can be, dependent, but that's where my question to you is about joint custody, right? Because if they're sharing joint custody week on, week off, and there is still a large gap between the income, the court will still order some sort of child support, but it's not going to be such a large amount of child support that mom is able to live off of it. Now, unless we're talking about a guy that's loaded, right? Then mom should not be able to live off of $1,000 a month every single month full time. Some people can, I don't know.
Some people they'll make that money work, but I'm more concerned about the fact that, like, if a guy is spending time with his kid, that doesn't necessarily change how much he's paying if he's already spending time with his kids and spending money on the kid directly. All in all, there seems to be a lot of like unknown things and confusion, at least on men's end and my end, about child support. So I'm just going to agree to disagree and accept that there might be a lot of things that I don't know, and the things that I do know don't really incentivize me or a lot of men to be like, yeah, this is for me, right? So clearly there's a lot of things that need to be discussed. But